On August 21st, 2017, in the Straits of Singapore, 10 United States Navy sailors lost their lives when the John McCain was rammed by a small tanker called the Alnic. Now, before I get to anything else about the Alnic, I'd like to say something. The United States Navy's command structure and the way they do business cost these men their lives. The commanding officer of the McCain was found at fault. The executive officer was found at fault. But the accident report pointed out some shortcomings. It appears that at the time, and I'm not sure where we're at right now, the system, the way that the United States Navy does its job of training, failed. Men died because of that failure. The men and women who were sent out in this time period to defend this nation aboard our warships were commanded by officers who themselves had been shortchanged by a training system that apparently simply wasn't up to the task. This case, along with the ramming of the Fitzgerald by the A6 Crystal, just a few months separated from this case, is personal. My daughter served as a sonar operator aboard an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. And in the case of the ramming of the Fitz, the 7 sailors who died were all from the same berthing. The same berthing where my daughter later had down tonight to rest. So, if I had known when she was serving aboard that ship what I know now, what I've read since these events, I doubt I would have gotten a decent night's sleep. In the process of making this video, I have discovered that the United States Navy has indeed made a number of changes since these incidents occurred. Good for them. We'll point them out, not all of them, but some of the salient ones. Doesn't take away from the fact that the National Traffic Safety Board report was damning. And I'm going to read to you from the executive summary, and if you want to look at the entire report, it is available online. But here is basically what you need to know. On August 21, 2017, the U.S. Navy destroyer John S. McCain was overtaking the Liberian flag tanker Alnic MC while both vessels were transiting the westbound lane in the middle channel passage of the Singapore Strait Traffic Separation Scheme. The destroyer crew had a perceived loss of steering, and while the crew attempted to regain control of the vessel, the John S. McCain unintentionally turned to port into the path of the Alnic MC. Now, it should be noted that in the report it stated that that turn was made 18 seconds after it was too late for the Alnic to have done anything about the collision. They couldn't stop it. They couldn't reverse engines. They couldn't turn fast enough. Turning that fast to avoid a collision in those crowded conditions might have resulted in a worse collision. At 5:24, the vessels collided. As a result of the collision, 10 John S. McCain sailors died, and the vessel sustained over $100 million in damage. No one was injured aboard the Alnic, and the vessel sustained less than $250,000 in damage. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of the collision between the John S. McCain and the tanker Alnic MC was a lack of effective operational oversight of the destroyer by the U.S. Navy, which resulted in insufficient training and inadequate bridge operating procedures. Contributing to the accident were John S. McCain's bridge team's loss of situational awareness and failure to follow loss of steering emergency procedures, which included a requirement to inform nearby traffic of their perceived loss of steering. Also contributing to the accident was the operation of the steering system in backup manual mode, which allowed for an unintentional unilateral transfer of steering control. Okay, addressing these point by point. The decision to transfer location of thrust control on board the John S. McCain while the vessel was in congested waterway. Okay, thrust control, the throttles, and we're talking about steering control. Why did that happen? In the backup manual mode that the system was operating in, it's a touch-screen system. There's no safeguard when you're transferring control. See, the helmsman had control of the throttle and the steering, and the order was given to transfer throttle control to another station. The helmsman did that, but in backup mode, the system allowed him to transfer helm and steer and throttle to that station instead of just the throttle control. In the standard mode, that wouldn't have happened. Attempting to transfer them both, backup something, a warning or something happens. And they were trying to figure that out when the whole thing happened. Where the command structure, the bridge crew or the officer in charge decision was criticized to transfer location of thrust control while the vessel was on congested waterway. They sound like it says a decision, but in reading the reports I've read, it sounds like he didn't mean to do it. Okay, and they talk about informing other vessels that they had lost steering control, but it says a lack of VHF radio communications between the vessels. Okay, then the automatic identification system transmission policy for Navy vessels. Up until this happened, the U.S. Navy vessels did not ping. Apparently, from what I can see, their transponders didn't transpond. They didn't pond. And so commercial vessels, which rely upon that data in addition to the radar to locate and identify vessels, wouldn't have seen the McCain on their system. And if they were relying heavily on that and less so on radar, which in crowded waterways has got to be really fun to try and figure out, they didn't know they were there. Now, in response to this, from what I can determine, the United States Navy now has our vessels pinging in crowded waterways. As a matter of fact, if you watched one of my videos on these shipping problems off of Long Beach and Los Angeles, you'll notice I put up a slide showing a screenshot of that area, and it shows a little icon that says U.S. Navy vessel. So apparently they've learned a lesson and they have taken action to prevent this from happening again. Good on them, if somewhat belatedly. They said that the training of Navy bridge watchstanders was deficient, that the Navy watchstanders were tired. The Navy's oversight of the John McCain was at fault, and the design of the destroyer's integrated bridge and navigation systems contributed to the problem. Apparently, also in response to this, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers have reverted to manual throttle control. So just like on the movies, you got those throttles right there. You can ram those babies forward or bring them back. I don't know if it's a 500-foot cable from that throttle back to the engines or not, but there you have it. Now we need to take a look at the Alnic herself. A 183-meter long tanker, 32.2 meters wide, 7 meters of draft. We'll look at what she is and where she is and a couple of interesting quirks about her. And then we're going to fire up the Wayback Machine and see what was happening in the days prior to the collision. The Alnic has been owned by more than one company. Interestingly enough, if you look at the list, it shows Energetic Tank Incorporated. Now, they show 2017. The name changes through to the Alnic. It shows that name change made in 2017. Here's the deal. At the time of the collision, and still today, according to Marine Traffic, which is pretty much the premier website for finding this stuff out, the Alnic is owned, and I kid you not, by Stealth Marine Corporation. Going back to our earlier list of names, you'll notice that in 2011, the vessel was known as the Tandara Spirit. Tandara Spirit is now a corporation that imports booze from Brazil. So I'm guessing that they didn't want to confuse people and think that it was coming in by the tanker load, and the name was changed to the Navig-8, get it? Navig-8 Stealth SV in 2015. The obvious similarity between the name in 2015 and the name of the owner listed on Marine Traffic, and the fact that this list has not been updated despite a apparent change of ownership, leads me to believe that the ownership of the vessel didn't change, but that the owner changed its name. Now, Stealth Marine is a case all by itself, because good luck trying to find out who they are, or who the officers are, or if anybody else owns them. If you can figure that out and track it down, let me know, because I couldn't. The Alnic left Busan, South Korea on the 5th of December this year. Her reported destination was Slavyanka in Russia, with an estimated arrival time on the 6th of December. Which seems pretty amazing, considering at 13 knots it would take several days to get there. I suspect that that actual reported destination refers more to where she is currently being reported as at, a spot that I'm almost certain she's not actually at. Now, I have been monitoring the expected arrivals in Slavyanka since the 8th of this month, and so far, Slavyanka shows no record of expecting the Alnic to arrive there at all. As of right now, the 13th of December at nearly midnight, Slavyanka is not showing that they expect to see the Alnic anytime in the next, well, more than 24 hours. So, basically what she's doing is she's wandered off on her own again without her transponder going, and we don't know where she's at or what she's up to. So why does any of this matter? Who really cares about what a 13-year-old oil tanker is doing, where it's at, and how it goes about conducting its business? I'll tell you why I think it matters, because I think I have uncovered something that bears upon the accident. And it's something I don't think the Navy addressed, and for reasons that either they didn't notice, they didn't care, or they're willingly covering something up. And I think we should take a closer look, so bear with me a few more minutes if you would, please. On 29 July, the Alnic departed China and rounded the Korean Peninsula on July 31. It bypassed Busan and Ulsan, where tankers usually go. Now, this is a little hard to make out, so let me explain it. You're seeing the course of the Alnic. The right-hand leg at the bottom of the screen is it's traveling generally northeast direction. And the leg on the left on the bottom is its return course. Now, you'll note the arrow saying 731 gives its course and its speed, 13.6 knots. That's the last reported position for its transponder until the arrow you see near the top. On the 4th of August, at 8:06 Universal Time, it was sitting still, doing 0.9 knots. It was just kind of swinging at anchor. 4 days after she shut her transponder off in crowded waters, and I'll explain why that's important in a minute, she's sitting at anchor with her speed given at 13.6 knots, allowing for reductions in speed and course changes. She still would have made the point of the uppermost arrow by approximately 0700 Universal Time on the 1st of August, if that's where she had gone. Obviously, she didn't go there. She went somewhere in North Korea, which is fine. China is an ally of North Korea, so that in and of itself isn't particularly curious. Wherever she went in North Korea, and whatever she delivered from the Chinese, we're not likely to find out. In any case, by the 4th, at 8 o'clock in the morning, Universal Time, she was sitting at this coordinate right here. While she was there, an unidentified high-speed craft apparently visited her from the island. And since there aren't a heck of a lot of private craft zipping around in North Korean waters, we can assume it had something to do with the government. As far as I've been able to determine, this particular island is not someplace you can just go to because you feel like going there. It is probably a place where high-ranking party members or other officials can go and play a little bit and do whatever they want, live a slightly higher lifestyle. Don't know for sure, and the North Koreans are not likely to tell me if I were to ask them. I would direct your attention now to the departure course from the Korean Peninsula. That's that long lead head out into the China Sea. They had shut the transponder off way up there by the peninsula, barely out of fairly dense waters, right about there, and we're headed south. The last reported speed was about 13 knots or so. She shows up briefly. The transponder went on briefly at the point you see on the screen right now. Wasn't on very long. It was a single point and then off again, and then it reappears once again at the point you see circled on the screen now. Now, so far, none of that's particularly unusual. But something happened shortly after this. The Alnic departs Taiwan, 15 August, 12:05 Universal Time. That's 8:05 local time. Her speed is 11.5 knots. 50 minutes later, she altered course to 180 degrees, increased her speed to 12.5 knots, and shut her transponder off. Now, the course you see is not straight south. Obviously, she traveled a different course. But if we draw a straight line between where her transponder was shut off and where the transponder was turned on again in the extremely crowded Singapore Strait, she would have had to be making in excess of 19 knots to make that trip. And since I think it's highly unlikely that she traveled the course you see there, she was making well over 19 knots. Tankers like the Alnic MC are capable of speeds in excess of 20 knots. It's not necessarily economical, but if they were in a hurry to get somewhere, they could do it with relative ease. But here's the thing. The transponder was off. Now, transiting the open ocean, that's no great problem. And for those of you who think that she was simply out of range of the terrestrial stations, here's the thing. Her transponder was not turned on again. It did not register anything until about 3 minutes after she rammed the McCain at 5:24. So, she didn't turn her transponder on in a timely manner. Now, the personnel aboard the McCain should have spotted her anyway. They should have been aware of her on radar. But what if they weren't really paying close attention? What if they got lazy and they were just looking at the data coming in from all the ships whose transponders were on, never thinking that a large ship would not have its transponder on in the crowding shipping lanes? And so we're set up for a tragedy. The naval ship tried transferring control to another station on the bridge, accidentally getting the throttle controls and the steering controls transferred at the same time. Also, the throttle controls between the left and right, port and starboard, were separated. They could be run independently, and there was a differential in thrust which increased the turn. The personnel on the bridge, maybe they were just looking at the data feed from the transponders. The Alnic didn't have her transponder on at all in a very crowded shipping lane. What was she hiding? Maybe it was just laziness or carelessness. They were being overtaken by the McCain. They might not have even realized that there was a threat involved. Heck, they may not have been aware that the McCain was actually overtaking them. 3 minutes after the collision, and the deaths of 10 men aboard the McCain, the Alnic turned her transponder on. And so, the course you saw on the screen earlier was her post-collision movements, which are not really relevant to the situation. But here we have a situation where a ship that nobody seems to know who actually owns, that is perpetually doing strange and mysterious things, and may very well have been culpable, at least for some part of the accident, is absolved of any wrongdoing. Now, I blame the Navy for what happened here, and I stand by that claim until somebody proves me different. But to completely absolve the Alnic when her transponder wasn't on and she has a long history of doing strange things, I don't know. It smacks of somebody not wanting to dig too deeply on purpose. It seems just a little bit too far out there to all be a big coincidence. Here's one more anomaly for you. If you go to marine traffic and check their vessel's database and search for all vessels owned by Stealth Marine, this is what you come up with. No records found. But if you go to the Alnic and check her vessel details, she shows being owned by Stealth Marine Corporation. When you consider the anomalies associated with this ship one by one, they don't seem to mean very much. But when you put them all together, you get the impression that there is truly more here than meets the eye. As a wise man once said, if it looks like a duck, and it swims like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, you may be looking at a duck. Thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate the viewership and I appreciate the comments. If you found this interesting, please put down a like and subscribe to the channel. If you think there's somebody out there that could see this and find it entertaining or interesting or maybe even a little sad and make them angry, please share it. Thanks again.